Thanks. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks very much. Friends, hasn't it been great to be back here in Liverpool for our conference once again? When I arrived here before the rally on Friday evening, I was delighted, a little taken aback, to see this enormous queue of people outside. And it was only later that someone told me that they were actually here for a Lionel Richie concert next door. I'm just glad I didn't ask them, is it me you're looking for? I had to. Last autumn, the news was dominated by dark and grisly stories. Allegations of child abuse, Ebola, ISIL, conflicts in Ukraine, Libya, Gaza. And then, one day in November, a different kind of story appeared on the news. A small group of scientists and engineers had spent years tracking a comet the size of a city as it hurtled through space from the edge of the solar system. And on that day in November, as that piece of rock was 500 million kilometers away, traveling 40 times faster than a bullet through the vacuum of space, we, humanity, landed an object the size of a washing machine on its surface. Of course, because nothing goes 100% to plan, it bounced off and flew back into space, and for a few nervous hours we waited. And then it sent us back a signal. It had landed. And there it was, sat on the surface of an alien rock it had no business being on, further away than the mind can conceive. And rolling news cameras were filming in the mission control room as the news of the initial landing came through. And as the room erupted in cheers and applause, the camera panned to Professor Monica Grady, one of a team of scientists from the Open University in Milton Keynes, who had dedicated 2 decades to this incredible Rosetta project. And she grabbed a TV reporter in an ecstatic embrace as tears of joy streamed down her face. I have to admit, the urge to spontaneously hug journalists is not something I generally feel at my press conferences. Anyway, setting that aside, what an amazing thing to have achieved. What an audacious, optimistic thing to have even dreamt of attempting. What an inspiring moment for thousands of young girls and boys to witness. What a beautiful, hopeful thing it said about us. The British people have had to put in the hard years and make real sacrifices these last 5 years. But if the last 5 years were about doing what was necessary, I want the next 5 to be about doing what is possible. I want us to take just a little bit of the spirit of that audacious project and start to think big. I want us to look to the future with renewed optimism. Britain is an open-hearted, open-minded, optimistic country, full of decent, hard-working, generous people, buzzing with creativity, innovation, entrepreneurialism. There is nowhere in the world like this country of ours. Nowhere as gutsy, nowhere as hopeful, nowhere as welcoming. We're a small island, but we're a big, big country. And the legacy of the financial crisis, the aftershocks of that brush with catastrophe, they've shaken us. But we take our hits on the chin. When we get knocked down, we get up, we brush ourselves off, and we carry on. In tough times, it is natural to fear the worst. But now it is time to dream of the best. By the way, I spoke to Professor Grady on Friday, and I am delighted to tell you that not only is she an inspirational and pioneering scientist, it also turns out that she is a proud, card-carrying Liberal Democrat. Though it's probably a bit of a stretch to add the Rosetta mission to the list of achievements that we've achieved in government. So, what next? What sort of Britain do we want to become in 2020? How about a Britain where a child can dream of what they want their life to be and not be held back from getting there by the circumstances of their birth or the colour of their skin? Where a young girl who saw Professor Grady's tears of joy on television can know that with talent and hard work, she too can achieve great things. How about a Britain where a young couple don't have to dream of owning their own home, but can actually afford to do it? Or where they can plan for their family, knowing that the choice of who returns to work and who stays at home with their baby is theirs and theirs alone? How about a Britain with a thriving economy, with British companies expanding and creating jobs and leading the world in cutting-edge green technologies? A Britain with clean air and green spaces where our natural heritage is protected for generations to come. A Britain with a world-class NHS where people know that if they or their loved ones fall ill, they will receive the best care in a way that suits their needs, and where there is no shame in suffering from anxiety or depression any more than there is if you break your arm. How about a united Britain with proper home rule for Scotland and Wales? And how about a Britain where a young gay, bisexual, or transgender man or woman can know in their heart that they will be accepted, not judged, for who they are? Or where a young Muslim or a young Jewish person can walk down the street without that nagging fear that they might not be welcome, where they can feel that this is their home as much as it is anybody else's. A stronger economy, a fairer society with opportunity for everyone. It's not just a slogan to stick on our leaflets or adorn conference auditoriums. It's a destination. That is the sort of Britain I want us to be. That is the sort of Britain we can help to build. So how do we get there? Let's start by making clear that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that all those sacrifices, all that hard work was worth it. While the job of fixing our economy is not over yet, the end is in sight. By sticking to the sensible and fair approach to balancing the books that we've pursued in government, we can end the era of cuts. We can end austerity in 3 years' time. And once we have, as the economy grows, we can invest again in our public services and in the modern infrastructure, the roads, railways, and houses that we need to flourish in the 21st century. We can make life a little bit easier for millions of working people by continuing to cut their tax, just as we have done every year in this government. We can spread opportunity to a new generation by protecting and investing in education. One of the proudest moments of my time in government so far was at the end of last year when the latest primary school results were published. They showed children from the poorest backgrounds getting their best ever results, and the gap between them and their better off classmates narrowing. This was in large part down to two decisions we, Liberal Democrats, took in government. The first was to protect the school's budget in real terms despite strong resistance from the Conservatives. And the second was to create the pupil premium, a policy straight from the front page of our manifesto that targets money, more than £1,000 per pupil every year, directly to the poorest children in our schools. Now that has made a real, tangible difference to the life chances of thousands of children, not just the poorest pupils, but their classmates too. So let's go further. Let's protect not just the school's budget and the pupil premium, but funding for early years, sixth forms, and colleges too. Let's triple the amount of money we target at the poorest children in nursery. Let's make sure every primary school child, not just the youngest, gets a healthy meal at lunchtime to help them learn in the afternoons. Let's make sure every child in a state school is taught by a qualified teacher. And I want every child to leave primary school to be confident at reading, ending child illiteracy for good. We can help young families to own their own homes by building hundreds of thousands of new houses, creating a new generation of garden cities and a new model of ownership where every time you pay your rent, you're buying a share in your own home. We can protect our natural heritage and lead the fight against climate change with our 5 green laws to look after our countryside and put us on the path to a zero-carbon Britain. We can build the liberal, innovative and open economy that will create jobs and power our growth for years to come. And while we're at it, let's help 1 million more women into work and close the gender pay gap too for good. We can give Scotland and Wales more power to determine their own destinies, just as we can for regions, cities and towns in England. We can restore faith in our immigration system with a firm but fair approach that counts people in and counts people out too. And we can make sure our NHS remains strong and meets the demands of a growing and ageing population by ensuring it has the extra money it needs to adapt and grow. But public services are about more than just numbers. In the end, they're about people. Yesterday, I visited a mental health trust in the north of this great city for the second time in the last few weeks. I met Iris, an extraordinary woman for whom a deeply traumatic childhood caused a lifetime of mental illness. And she told me the enormous difference it simply makes when people treat her normally, when they shake her hand without flinching, look her in the eyes, and when they talk to her, they don't look away in embarrassment. I also met Robert, who'd been both a carer and a patient. And he told me that a little while ago he had been in hospital with a heart condition. And while he was there, he was visited regularly by family and friends, sometimes as much as 3 or 4 times a day. And of course, to be surrounded by loved ones and well-wishers meant a huge amount to him. But he told me he'd also been hospitalized once before, and that time for a mental health condition. There were no regular visitors. In 5 long, lonely months in hospital, he was visited just 3 times. And that tells you everything about the stigma that surrounds mental health. It is real, and it is devastating. For too long, millions of people have lived with their private stories of pain. In government, we have slowly started undoing the damage caused by years of neglect to mental health services. It's not been easy. We've had to fight for resources. And sometimes it's felt a bit like for every 2 steps forward we've taken, individual local decisions have taken us a step back. But we have made real progress. Equality for mental health treatment enshrined in law, the first ever waiting times standards, and hundreds of millions of pounds for talking therapies and services for young people with eating disorders. And in next week's budget, we will do something big and bold to address possibly the most heart-wrenching tragedy of all of this. In our country, there are thousands upon thousands of children with mental health problems who go without treatment or support. On average, 3 children in every classroom has a mental health condition. You heard me right. 3 children in every classroom in Britain in 2015. That cannot be allowed to carry on. And that's why I have announced that we will be putting an extra £1.25 billion over the next 5 years into mental health services for children and young people, with the first ever waiting time standards to go with them and a new plan to get specialists in children talking therapy to every part of England. It's a plan that I've worked up with Norman Lamb and Simon Stevens, the head of NHS England, that will give the NHS the resources it needs to treat more than 100,000 children and young people by 2020. That is more than 100,000 lives we can change for good. And by the way, can I just also add my own immense admiration, which I'm sure everyone in this room shares, for the dignity and courage with which Norman Lamb has responded this morning to the public scrutiny. Norman, everyone here is with you and Mary and your family. But we must keep going. We can and we must make sure mental health is treated with the same urgency as physical health, with money to back that up. And we must work every day to end the stigma. And that's why I'm so immensely proud that we are the first party to put equality for people with mental health problems on the front page of our Liberal Democrat manifesto. A Britain with a stronger economy and a fairer society. That's the country I want us to be in 5 years' time. But our recovery cannot be taken for granted. The fairer society we're building is not a given. Our future as an optimistic, open-hearted, outward-looking country, it's not guaranteed. Right here, right now, liberal British values, tolerance, generosity, moderation are under threat as never before. The story of the early 21st century is one of change at a relentless pace. The digital revolution, the global financial crisis, climate change, the rise of extremist ideologies, and here at home and across Europe, reactionary populism and divisive nationalism are on the rise, slowly moving from the margins to the mainstream. And as the world changes around us, how we respond will dictate the sort of society we live in and shape the lives of our children and grandchildren for decades to come. If we want to remain an open, confident, outward-looking society, it will only happen if political parties who believe in compassion and tolerance step up to the plate. And instead, the opposite is happening. Labour and the Conservatives are deserting the centre ground. Compromise is treated like a dirty word. Everywhere you look, there is blame and division. It's in the angry nationalism of UKIP, setting citizen against citizen as they pander to fear. It's in Theresa May's go-home vans, in the glint in George Osborne's eye as he announces that the working-age poor will bear the brunt of the cuts. It's in the red-faced bluster of those Tory right-wingers who are determined to scrap the Human Rights Act and drag us out of Europe. It's in the us versus them scaremongering of the Labour Party as they condemn every decision to balance the books as a betrayal and then make wild predictions about mass unemployment or the death of the NHS that they know are not true. As the Conservatives and Labour parties veer off to the left and the right, who will speak up for decent, moderate, tolerant Britain? UKIP? The Green Party? Respect? The SNP? The DUP? What will Britain become? If Cameron's Conservatives or Miliband's Labour spend the next 5 years begging for votes from that ragtag mob of nationalists, populists and special interests, not one of them will stand up for the moderate majority. Not one of them will keep Britain united. There's a whole cottage industry that's sprung up trying to predict which parties could end up in coalition with each other after the next election. And this morning, actually, we hear that UKIP are offering a pact with the Tories, just as the SNP has offered to prop up the Labour Party. In the one case, by the way, neither of which were denied by Ed Balls or George Osborne on television this morning. In the one case, to take the UK out of Europe, in the other, to take Scotland out of the United Kingdom. So let me be clear. Just like we would not put UKIP in charge of Europe, we're not going to put the SNP in charge of Britain, a country they want to rip apart. It's just not going to happen. Only the Liberal Democrats will keep Britain on track and govern for the whole of the country. We've shown that we're prepared to put the national interest first, even if it means taking a hit to our short-term popularity. And we will continue to put the national interest first. If others won't stand up to the growing mood of divisive populism, we will. We will face down the nationalists and isolationists who seek to divide our society. We will stand up for tolerance, decency and fairness. I won't let the populists decide what Britain becomes. I won't let the Conservatives or Labour decide what Britain becomes. Britain is an open-minded, open-hearted, generous country. Britain needs people who will defend those values now more than ever. Britain needs liberal voices right here, right now. So this election is about what sort of Britain we're going to be in 5 years' time. So what sort of Britain do Labour and the Conservatives want? Do they even know? David Cameron and Ed Miliband are not offering light at the end of the tunnel. They're not offering hope. They're in a sort of defensive crouch, hoping to win by default, not because the British people share their vision, but because they dislike them a little less than the other guy. Look at the way David Cameron tried to dodge the leaders' debates by hiding behind the Green Party. It's the greenest thing he's ever done in government. Actually, now I kind of think about it, it's also the yellowest. And the most arrogant, for that matter. Or Ed Miliband, whose election pitch appears to be that he's not David Cameron. It speaks volumes that the most interesting thing that the Labour Party has done in the run-up to the general election is buy a pink van. Where's the substance? Where's the vision? Where's the hope? Labour appear to have learned nothing since they had their chance and wasted it. We have still had no apology from them for crashing the economy, destroying jobs and slashing incomes. They've taken no responsibility for the tough choices they forced on us in government because they left us, in the famous words of the letter that David Laws found in his desk in the Treasury, with no money. And the fact is this: you can't have a fairer society that creates opportunity for everyone if the economy is weak. Yesterday, Ed Miliband unveiled his new pledge card. That card costs £70 billion. That's how much more than us Labour will borrow in the next 5 years. £70 billion. More than we spend on schools and the police put together. And they would leave us paying an extra £4 billion just paying off the interest on our debt. It's not a pledge card. It's a credit card. And you, me, and every other British taxpayer will be paying the bill for years to come. Putting the two Eds in charge of the economy again is like buying a car from Delroy and Rodney. You won't see your money again, and at some point you know it's going to crash. The Conservatives, well, they don't offer light at the end of the tunnel either, do they? They've made that crystal clear. As George Osborne said to rapturous applause at the Conservative Party conference, they will cut much deeper than is necessary to balance the books and make the poorest bear the heaviest burden. Gone are the days of compassionate conservatism. Now they promise to cut and cut and cut. Not because they have to, but because they want to. In the firing line are teachers and social workers, soldiers, police officers, and education. We have spent 5 years stopping the Conservatives from doing immense damage to the life chances of our children, whether it's their attempt to cut the school's budget in real terms, or bringing back the old-fashioned two-tier education system. Some Tories even wanted to let free schools be run for profit. The Conservatives are a threat to education. They will take billions of pounds away from existing schools in order to create 500 more free schools, regardless of whether or not they're actually needed at all. And they will cut drastically the money that goes to nurseries, to sixth forms, to colleges. Why? Because it's what they do. Cows moo, dogs bark, and Tories cut. It's in their DNA. The huge welfare cuts they propose mean taking £1,500 from 8 million families on the lowest incomes in our country. Not the wealthy, not the better off, not their friends in big business and big houses. They're not even pretending that they want us to be all in this together anymore. The Conservative plan for the next government is an ideological lurch to the right. They've gone from being the self-proclaimed heirs to Blair to Nigel Farage in white tie. And yet they have the gall to say that they're staying on the road to recovery. They're not staying on the road, they're veering off it. David Cameron, George Osborne, you can't have it both ways. You cannot say that this government has done the right thing and then in the next breath call for a drastic change of course. Either we are doing the right thing or we are not. And if we are, then why won't you stick with it? And I'll tell you why. Because left to their own devices, the Conservatives will cut public services, take away support from the poor, and look after their own kind in a way they haven't been able to do in this government because we were there to stop them. The Labour Party or the Conservative Party. What a dismal choice. The SNP or UKIP. All they offer is division and blame. The Green Party, no plan, at least nothing based in reality. Only the Liberal Democrats will keep Britain on track. Only the Liberal Democrats will cut less than the Conservatives and borrow less than Labour. Only the Liberal Democrats have a plan to build a stronger economy and a fairer society with opportunity for everyone. And we can do it. The 5 priorities on the front page of our manifesto, ending austerity, cutting taxes, investing in education and health, and protecting our environment, we can say we will do these things because, unlike ever before, we have a record of action in government to back us up. A record achieved not in a time of plenty, where there's cash to throw around, but a record achieved in the very toughest of circumstances. Back in May 2010, uncertainty was everywhere. As images of riots on the streets of Athens were beamed into British homes in the days running up to the election, people at home and abroad were looking to Britain. And they were wondering, would we be next? So when the chance came to enter government, the big question we faced was this: could we rescue the British economy? And it wasn't just a question of what we would do, but a question of whether we were up to the task. Would we, this brave third party with no experience of national government, have what it takes? Liberal Democrats, we have been tested and we passed the test. We rescued the economy. We held our nerve. And make no mistake, the recovery would not be happening without the Liberal Democrats. The story of the last 5 years is one of rescue at a time of emergency. But it's also a story of how we, in government for the first time in generations, have delivered policy after policy to make Britain fairer. A story of spreading opportunity despite the toughest of circumstances. More than 1,400 gay people are now married, hopefully happily. More than 2 million apprentices are learning the skills they need for their careers. 1.6 million boys and girls are getting a hot, healthy lunch every day at school. More than 26 million people on low and middle incomes have had their income tax cut every year, worth more than £800 from next month, and more than 3 million of the lowest paid workers are no longer paying any income tax at all. And I want to go further, much further, in next week's budget to cut taxes for ordinary people again. Twice as many homes are now being powered by renewable electricity. 43,000 small businesses have been supported by the British Business Bank. Thousands of mums and dads will soon be able to decide for themselves how to balance work and family. Nearly 12 million pensioners are getting a bit more in their pockets thanks to the triple lock guarantee. And no more children of asylum seekers are being locked behind bars. We did that. You did, all of us, everyone in this room and everyone out knocking on doors, making phone calls, pushing leaflets through letterboxes. Every single one of us had a hand in making Britain fairer. And we did something else too, something quite historic. We changed the political landscape forever. 5 years ago, we were told a hung parliament would be a disaster for Britain. We were told that without a clear majority for one of the old establishment parties, Britain would collapse into chaos. And we proved them wrong. We broke the stranglehold of the two old parties and proved that coalition can be strong, stable, and successful. We proved that the give and take of different parties working together can be a very British way of getting things done. We challenged the power of the vested interests on the left and right of the British establishment, and boy, have we felt their wrath in return. And we are still standing. At the heart of our success has been an incredible resilience. As Labour and the Conservatives have flailed around, pulled to the left and the right by competing factions, we haven't wavered. We've remained strong and resolute, anchoring the government in the mainstream centre ground and ensuring stability and making sure that tough decisions were taken as fairly as possible. It is because of our resilience that Britain has a strong, stable government and a strong, stable recovery. It is because of our resilience that we've been able to achieve incredible things. And it is because of that resilience that we will defy the odds and win again this May. So when people tell you we can't, tell them where to go. I have a message for all those who are writing us off once again. The Liberal Democrats are here to stay. I've heard the predictions, I've seen the polls, but let me tell you this, we will do so much better than anyone thinks. In those seats where we're out there in force, making our case loudly and proudly, we're the ones making the weather, I've seen it for myself in Liberal Democrat seats right across the country. We're showing that with hard work, strong local campaign teams, and a record of delivering for people in national and local government, we can and we will win. We have demonstrated it in countless council elections. We have demonstrated it in mayoral elections in Bedford and Watford. We demonstrated it in Eastleigh, in the only parliamentary by-election that was held on our turf. It won't be easy, but winning shouldn't be. We need to persuade people every day between now and May the 7th that their lives will be better with Liberal Democrat councillors making a difference in their communities, Liberal Democrat MPs fighting their corner in Westminster, and Liberal Democrat ministers serving them in government. Every Liberal Democrat elected in May makes our voice louder. So get out there and tell people what we've done to help them and their community. No one else will do it for us. Tell them what we've done to build a stronger economy and a fairer society and what we want to do next. The story of the next 5 years must be one of hope. If you're thinking of voting Conservative but are worried that they won't be fair, don't do it. If you're thinking of voting Labour but are worried they will ruin the economy, don't do it. If you think a vote for UKIP or the Greens or the SNP is harmless, it isn't. If you want a stable government that won't lurch to the extremes of left or right, you have to vote for it. If you want a stronger economy and a fairer society, you have to vote for it. If you want a government that will create opportunities for everyone, vote Liberal Democrat. This is a fight for our future, for the decent values of our country. We can and we must win. Thank you very much. Thank you.